Hi, welcome to Petradot. And in this lesson, we are going to be learning arrays. Array in Java is a variable that holds multiple values of the same type. Recall in our previous lessons, we said that a variable is a container that is used to hold values. And each of the container, when you declare a variable, you also declare the type of data, the type of variable or data is going to be holding. For example, you can say our variable should hold an integer, a whole number, where you have something like int num equals to 10, something like this. So here you are defining that the type of data type you should have should be an integer. That is what this variable should hold. So a variable is an array is similar to a variable, but the difference is that it holds multiple values, not just 10. You understand? So, but then we have different types of arrays, which is one-dimensional array, two-dimensional array or 2D, and the multi-dimensional array. But in this lesson, we are just going to focus on this one-dimensional array. Now, to declare a one-dimensional array, it goes this way, which is, for example, you define the type int, then followed by a block bracket, then followed by the name of the array. For example, numbers. So at this point, we have just declared an array. Declaration. So this point now we have declared an array. So the next thing is to initialize this array. And to initialize an array, it comes with you specifying the size. So because in Java or in programming language, normal array, every array is fixed sized, right? Where you have something like nums equals to new int. Then inside a block bracket, you pass the size you want the array to have. Meaning this array can only contain 5 whole numbers. Anything more than 5 cannot work. That's what it means. You just define the size. Then the next thing you do is to assign values to each of the boxes in this array. Remember, when you declared an array and initialized it to a size of 5, at this point, there is no data in it. It is just empty boxes, 5 boxes. So the next thing is to assign some values into these boxes for it to hold. And for you to do that, array is index based, meaning that for you to access each box, you access it with a particular address called an index, right? So since there are 5, we'll have an index that starts from 0 to 5 minus 1. Yes. So each of the array, for you to access the index, is like 0 to length of the array minus 1. So for example, let's assign values to them. So you now say numbers at position 0 should be equals to 10, for example. Then numbers at position 1 should be equals to 20. Numbers at position 2 should be equals to 30. And numbers at position 3 should be 40. Then finally, that of 4 should be 50, right? So if you can ask, why is it that we are not using position 5 since our length is 5? The reason is because the index by default starts from 0. Yes, it starts from 0. And when you start from 0 means the index will end at 4. Anything outside 4 and goes above 4 will throw out of bound error, an exception. Yes, it will throw an out of bound exception. So let's just print out what this array and see system.out.println arrays.toString numbers. Array provides us with a default method which you can use to print out all the contents of an array as a string. So let's just run this program and see. You can see now, look at the items in the array. They are listed here. So at this point, each item is numbered, is given an address of index 0 here, 1 here, 2 here, 3, and then finally 4. So since array is index based, it also means that for me to access each item, I will have to call their addresses and the computer will return it for me. So let's say, for example, I want to access the item at position 2. I want to know the the value that is at position 2, you do something like this: system dot out dot print line. Let me remove this one. So dot print line numbers at position 2. Let's see what is at position 2. So you run this program. You can see the item at position 2 is 30, and that is what we're having here. So that is how to use index to access each item in a particular array. So recall that here what we did was, first of all, we declared, we initialized here, and then we assigned values to each of these boxes in the array. So, but then you can still declare an array and initialize it on the same line by doing something like this: norms equal to new int. Then you pass the what? The length, the size of the array. Remember, we said that array in Java is fixed sized. So anytime you are going to declare an array, by default you are supposed to pass the size of the array. How many items do you want the array to continue? But then you can also define an array by assigning the values directly when you define it. So that time you declared it, you can just assign the values at the same time by doing something like this. Let's say we want to hold the names of students in our class. So we'll have string. Let's create an array of string. Student equal to, then you open a curly braces. So inside here is where you are going to enter the items of the names of the students in the class. So where we have James, comma, Alice, comma, Bob, comma, Juliet. Is a strange Juliet. All right, we just declared an array now. So if we want to access the item, any item here, any name here, we want to know the second student in this array. Who is the second student? What do? You just say student at position 2. Okay, second student should be position 1, not 2. Position 1, because our first student is in index 0. So the next student, which is the second, should be in index 1. So let's run the program and see. Change this into student. All right, let's run it and see. You can see that the student at position 1 is Alice, and these are all the students we have in the class, right? Okay, now for us to print out all the items in this array, probably list them one after the other. You can remember that we did loop before, which we said that loop is used to loop through a list of items and print all of them on the screen one after the other. So we can use a loop to go through these items, because since when running a loop, you can use the index, especially when you're using a for loop. So let's say we want to print out all the items one after the other using a loop. We can do something like this: for int I equal to 0, I is less than student dot length, then I plus plus. So let's do something like this: system dot out of print line I. So why did we do this in this way? Let's explain this. Remember that the first time this is going to run. Okay, let's just run it first. So I'll use that to explain it. Let's run this. Okay, we have our James, everything listed, then to Juliet. Now let's explain now. At this point, when this array started, it initialized I to be 0. Now the question is, why must it be 0? Why don't you make it 1? If I make it 1, means I have skipped James, because the first time it will come, I will be 1, and we'll pass I here, which is 1. It will automatically come and print Alice instead of James. So that is why we make our I to be 0, because in every array, the first item starts from 0. So it will now check, is 0 less than the length? Yes, it is less than length. It will print out this: give me the student that is at position 0, and it will print James, which is what is here. It will now increment I. Then it will check again, is I still less than students.length? Yes, because student.length is actually 4, right? So it will now check, which is okay. I is now 1. It will now print out students at position 1, which is Alice, and Alice was printed. Then it will now increment I again, making it 2. Now it will check again. Is 2 less than students.length, which is 4? Yes. It will pass 2 here. And then tell you, give me the student at position 2, which is Bob. And Bob was printed. It will now increment it again to 3. Increments I to 3. And it will check, is I, which is 3, less than student.length, which is 4? Yes, it is. So 3 is less than 4. It will now pass 3 here, which is the index of I. So give me the student at position 3. That is when we have Juliet. So it will now increment it. At this point now, I is 4. Now it will now ask, is 4 less than students.length? No, it is not, because the length of the array is 4, and this is 4, and 4 is not less than 4. Hence, this will not be called, and the loop ends. So that is where I see now that each of the items was printed and nothing else happened. Now imagine that we did less than or equal to, meaning this I will not just be less than student. This loop will not end when it is less than the length. It will end when it is equal to 4. But at this point, let's run it and see what is going to happen. You see, it is throwing an index 4 out of bound for length 4. Watch, it printed this thing successfully. It started, went to James, it was normal. It went to index 1, it was normal. Index 2, normal. Index 3. And it now passed index 4. At that moment, it said, I can't access this 4. There is nothing like 4 here. It seems you have gone out of the bound of the array. That is why it threw this error. Hence why we made I to be less than student.length. All right. So, and this will be the end of this lesson. To recap, we see that an array is a variable that is used to hold multiple values of the same type. And then we'll have different types of array: one-dimensional arrays, two-dimensional arrays, and multi-dimensional arrays. And we say that arrays in Java are fixed sized and they are index based, meaning that for you to assign value to assign any value to an array, you have to use index. And for you to also pick an item from an array, you have to use an index. So if I'm looking for James, I'll use index 0. If I'm looking for Alice, I'll use index 1. And same applies to others as it goes. Yeah. So then for you to print all the items in an array, you can as well use for loop, or you can even use for each loop. So let's do that for each loop, which is for each item for strange name in students system.out.println name. So at this point, we don't need index to access this one. You can just print it directly. Exactly. So you can see that we still have it. So you can only use index if you want to perform a specific action to each of the items. But this can be another shorter way to do what you want. All right. And that will be the end of this lesson. So if you have any question or confusion, do well to drop it on the comment section. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.